I'm now doing the audio. All right, welcome everyone. I am so happy to have my friends here and for a little chat. And I think, we're all going to learn something from each other and we're all going to crack each other up, I'm sure. Um, I would love to introduce, I guess I'll go in the order for me from left to right clockwise. Tara Murphy from 360 Media in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for
Hi,
joining.
thank you for having me.
And Regina Joskow, like, I have admired you for years and years, and your work has always been top notch.
You're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
From Rounder Records, and then Ellen Solis, who has been, God, like my partner in crime for so many years lately.
Totally.
Q2 PR,
Mhm.
and Jeremy Murphy, my friend, the other
Oh,
Murphy, and the other 360 of
yeah.
360
How weird is
Bespoke.
that?
So
I
weird.
know. It's like great. I'm like, relatives, relatives.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And everybody kind of does things in such a different way. So, that's why I love that I have this particular set of people here because, like, for instance, Tara is doing such amazing cultural PR. I mean, I met her when she was at a record label. So Tara, talk about what 360 does.
Sure. Thank you again for having me. I'm so thrilled to be with everybody. I was saying to Jamie earlier, many of you I remember when we were in our festival days. So that was a part of 360's iteration. But we turned 25 this past January. So we've been in the Atlanta market for 25 years. And I went to school in North Carolina at Elon University and got a degree in communications and knew I wanted to be in the music industry. There isn't much of a music industry there. So I did a little bit of college radio and then moved back to Atlanta and got a job at a concert promoter and worked for what is the equivalent now of Live Nation. But the office was of Alex Cooley and Peter Conlon for anybody that's into festivals and events. And Music Midtown here in Atlanta was my very first client. And I did, right prior to 360, I worked for an indie label called Ichiban Records. And that is how I met Jamie many, many moons ago. Did that for a while and then went to a label called NMC Records and then started 360. And so 360, we do entertainment, lifestyle, and hospitality. The entertainment side of it has obviously changed. In the beginning, it was a lot of bands on tour. It was a lot of record label work, some festivals. And then we really moved heavily into festivals and events. So things like Voodoo Music Experience and Telluride Blues and Brews and Bottle Rock, Hangout, all of those events. And then some regional festivals and events in Nashville, DC, Atlanta. But all the while, as I was getting older and enjoying travel, we moved a little bit into more hospitality with hotels, cruises like the Rock Boat and that whole series of events. And then got into, crazy enough, commercial real estate for lifestyle. And so we've been doing food halls, restaurants, a lot of events still in Atlanta, as well as venue openings for amphitheaters or small clubs. So we definitely run the spectrum, and it really depends on kind of what I'm interested in at that moment. But as I have grown up with the business, I've kind of explored other opportunities with food and beverage, cookbook offers, all kinds of stuff. So while music is always going to be my passion, it's not our primary focus with clientele right now.
Yeah, yeah. Totally. Who is that? A dog in someone's house? Weird.
Like
I hear a weird sound. It sounded like barking.
I
I
did
mean,
hear that.
we have a 7-month-old puppy, but he's upstairs.
Yeah, I was gonna say it doesn't sound like your puppy.
No.
Like a
Awesome. Regina, would you like to tell us a little story about your
Well, I had grand ambitions of becoming a music journalist. And right out of college, there was a brand new magazine that was launching. And I finagled my way into a job as the assistant to the executive editor of Spin magazine, which at the time when it first launched in 1985, when I graduated, was owned by the folks that owned Penthouse magazine, Bob Guccione Sr. So we were in the same building, but
Wow.
unlike them, where it was very, very posh and luxurious and lots of scantily clad, beautiful, it was kind of like stepping into Las Vegas when you got off the elevator on the penthouse floor, like women in evening gowns walking around, really kind of nutty. They were all friends of Bob Senior's. I managed to get a job at Spin, where we sat on canvas directors' chairs, and the staff usually slept there the night before the magazine shipped to the printer. And I was doing a little bit of writing, and then we started sponsoring some tours and started doing some really interesting breaking news stories. This investigative journalist there did a piece about David Crosby, and then he did a piece about Sly Stone. This is when both of them were kind of at rock bottom. And Ed Kirsch did these really hard-hitting pieces about them. And my boss said, we need to get some news coverage on these. Here's a list of press outlets. Can you call them and see if anyone wants to talk to Ed? So I was fearless because I was too dumb to know any better. So at the end of the day, I went to him and said, okay, so NBC News would like Ed on tomorrow, and this person from ABC News wants to talk to him, and this person from the Daily News wants to interview him, and this person from this outlet. And he looked at me and said, wait, they want to interview Ed? And I said, yeah. Well, did I do something wrong? And he said, no. And he took me by the arm and marched me down to Bob Guccione Jr.'s office and said, this is our new publicist. And I said, wait, what does the publicist do?
I love it.
So from there, I went to a bunch of labels, a couple of indie labels, Frontier Records, and then opened the US office of Roadrunner Records, where I worked with King Diamond and a bunch of other thrash.
And that's a job we shared.
Yeah.
I had that later. Yeah.
And from there, I was hired to be the alternative publicist at Atlantic Records, which is where I worked with Ellen. Spent 4 years there, and then went to Polygram, London, Sire Records, spent a decade at Verve, and now I've been at Rounder for 8 years. So I've worked everything from British pop to indie rock to drum and bass DJs to legacy jazz artists, and now roots music. So
you really ran the gamut.
Well, I mean, yeah, if I look at my career and go, okay, so I have worked King Diamond, Linda Ronstadt, Herbie Hancock, Paul Weller, the Meat Puppets, Portishead, DJ Shadow, and Alison Krauss.
Wow.
That's brilliant. I love
So,
it.
And I still
Don't forget Diana Krall.
Diana Krall and her husband, Elvis.
And her husband, exactly.
So cool.
Yeah, I mean, it like the list goes on and on and on. I actually forget sometimes, and then I'll be out with my kids in a restaurant and someone will come on the radio and I go, oh, wow, I was their publicist. And they look at me and go, wait, what? You worked with Aaron Neville? You never told me you worked with Aaron Neville. And I go, yeah, I forgot.
Right.
I love it.
That's awesome. Ellen.
Oh, I worked with Bob Geldof at 2 different labels.
Did you?
Yeah.
I just want to add about Regina that
Yeah.
when she got the gig at Atlantic as the alternative publicist, that may sound like a common word now, but at the time that she came to work with Peter Kupke at Atlantic, it was this kind of like bratty startup department that nobody really knew, because Atlantic was known for the legacy artists like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. And here came Regina talking about Sonic Youth and, you know, all these artists. And it was like, what are they doing? And they were on a different floor from us and stuff. And they were just like, what are those people doing over there? You know? And it was like the foretelling of an entire generation of music that really, Regina, I'm not, hyping you for no reason. It's the truth. I mean, she was really
Oh,
first, even before, the genius of Janet Billig at Atlantic and all of those people. Regina, working with Peter Kupke, was really the forerunner of like bringing that music to a bigger audience and a larger stage, and having that define the generation that was coming.
that's why I'm such a big fan of yours, Regina.
Well,
So,
you're very sweet. But the fascinating thing actually about the alternative department, because we were the first major label to start an alternative
Oh
marketing
yeah,
department,
that's right.
and it was Robert Plant's idea.
Seriously, I didn't know that.
Robert Plant was very, very close to Peter Kupke, who signed him.
Wow.
And Robert said to Ahmed, you've got all these hair metal bands, which are great, but you got to get with the program. And he tried to get Ahmed to sign Husker Du because they were one of his favorite bands.
Yet another reason for us to like adore him, like to the nth
yeah.
degree of life,
Yeah, he told Ahmed, like, look, you got to get with the program. This shit is not going to be around forever. And this is the future, and you need to embrace it.
Yeah.
And Ahmed went to Peter and Osman and said, go hire some people. And that's how that all happened. And then
That's amazing.
shortly thereafter, pretty much every major label within the next year and a half had
Yep.
an alternative marketing department. And it's all because of Robert Plant.
And the funny thing is that at the same time that was happening, we were upstairs working with Robert Plant on the Now and Zen record. And everybody up there was like, oh, he's 40, in these hushed tones. Like, how can he be 40? And, I was sitting there looking at him like, honey, he could be any age he wants. Like, just put me on the road. I was like so thrilled. This young, I had been hired there as a tour publicist. It was my first job out of Rogers and Cowan. I had been an assistant there. And they put these things in front of me, the tour sheets and stuff. And they were like, here, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Robert Plant. And I was like, I have arrived. I can work for free. You're actually going to pay me to do this? That was happening at the same time. So it's just Atlantic, there's not enough words to fill a book, Regina, as you and I both have talked about our love and admiration for Amit and that entire team, because the stories are endless, right? And what an incredible thing to know. I didn't know that about Peter and Robert, but it makes total sense to me, now his musical journey that he's taken, since that time. It makes total sense to me, it's amazing. You're amazing.
Ellen, you want to talk a little bit about how you came up?
Sure. I was an engineer at WNBC in New York. I was a Teamster. I was a member of NABIT out of college, which was the National Association of Broadcast Engineers. And I was this, 21-year-old girl. I remember going to see the Clash at Bonds, and I had to be at work at 6 a.m. And that was the night the air conditioning broke at Bonds. And I took my shirt off because I was just in a bra and these purple pants. And I had my shirt around me, and I was like, oh shit, I have to put this on before I walk into 30 Rock, So that was my life. And then I, was reading Cosmo one night at the board, because I push buttons for a living. And it was like, it was Cosmopolitan. And it was like, here are the traits you need to be a celebrity publicist. And it was like, you need to be bold, you need to be able to write, and you need to be something about not scared, like when you're with these people. And I was like, check. And so I called the one publicist in the article, this woman, Carol, who worked with Paul McCartney at the time. And I pretended I was still in college. And I said, I'm doing my thesis and I need to interview you because I want to do my thesis on publicists. And she believed me. So I went in and I brought a notebook and I was talking to her, and she was like, wow, you'd be great at this. Why don't you try it? And I was like, really? Meantime, I was like dying, and it just so happened that I took the buyout I read the contract of NABIT, and it said, like, if you want to leave, and we'll pay you a year's salary to leave, because they were phasing out technology. And I went to my boss the next day and I was like, listen, is this true here? These two sentences about you could pay me? And they were like, yeah, how did you find that? I'm like, I read the fucking thing. You know what I mean? I read the contract.
Go figure.
And he's like, we have to offer it to you now. So they paid me a year's salary to go. And from Carol, she recommended me to Rogers and Cowan, and I didn't get a job, but then someone there, Harriet, I'm sure Regina knows what I'm talking about. Harriet recommended me to all the people at Howard Bloom. Howard was like the premier indie at the time. And he hired me to be the assistant, and basically what I was doing was taking attendance because all the publicists there were on drugs. Like literally me and Howard and his then wife, Linda, were the only sober people in the office, and it was in this really weird office. I was sitting there one day in this little corner and I heard Bette Midler screaming from the doorway, "Howard, move these boxes. I can't get to your fakakta office." She was coming up to visit me. And I was like, I can't believe Bette Midler is like 4 feet from me. Like I literally had a job for 2 hours and this was happening. And then from there, they hired me at Rogers and Cowan after that. And then I worked there and I knew I wanted to be at a label. And, Atlantic was hiring and I was like, that's a dream. For me, it was a dream because, when you're a young teenager in the 70s, you're pretty much looking at the Atlantic logo spinning on your turntable back in those days. And I was like, there's real people at that thing that's spinning. I want that,
Ken Scrudato says he thinks everyone was on drugs. So,
exactly.
Back then.
But it was scary because people would be like, I would call and be like, you have to come in. You have to roll out of bed. Like I was literally doing drug addict therapy on these people. Like, please come in, but it was when I look back and I'm like, wow, you know what I mean? Like what a time it was.
Yeah.
Like Janet Jackson was calling Howard and, he was working on literally every huge thing it was his moment as an indie, Yeah. And then I got to Atlantic and I thought the sun had risen on my life. And then I went to Epic after that because that was the next dream. It was like, that was the label The Clash was on. And I heard that, they were hiring and I wanted to get promoted and I went there, and I spent almost a little over a decade at Epic and 550. And then, as you know, I was an indie, since that time, since 99. And I left the business for a while. I was working at Macy's Logistics. I just said, fuck everything. It was, 2008, the whole world crashed and I just couldn't handle it anymore. I had a young daughter and I got a job in the complete polar opposite of anything music. A bunch of white men in logistics, no offense to them at all. I'm just saying that's logistics.
Right.
And I lasted there for about 2 years. And then I was like,
yeah, I got out for 3 years also. So I get it. Sometimes you need a refresh.
I did. And, the world changed and I had to kind of relearn, Jamie, as you know, you hired me to come work with you. And I was rusty as hell. I was like, what the fuck is this new world that we're in? This digital thing. Like, I don't email for a living. I like talking to people,
Right. Yeah.
So that's it. That's here
awesome.
I am with you guys.
And so Jeremy, your practice is like more fashion focused and beauty focused, right? Or am I wrong? Like I want to hear about your journey.
Yeah, so my company is 360 Bespoke. So 360, hey, in the house. And it is luxury lifestyle, hospitality, fashion, beauty, arts, some startups, lifestyle, books. So I started it 5 years ago. This April. 5-year anniversary. I have kind of a different journey. I started as a newspaper reporter for a daily newspaper in Boca Raton. And then it was Night Raider newspapers when they actually existed. Yeah. And so I worked for 2 of their baby newspapers and I was a reporter. So I covered everything from car crashes to city council meetings and courts and cat weddings and society. And then I got recruited to work for Media Week magazine in New York, and I did that. And then CBS Television recruited me, and I wound up spending 14 years there, starting out as a copy editor and as someone to help improve the writing in the department, and gradually I became a PR guy, and I started, representing the department and pitching executive profiles and writing speeches and taking press calls and writing statements and whatnot. And I did that for 14 years. And I turned 40 and I said, is this all there is? Because I really wanted to do, I wanted to work in the arts. I wanted to work in lifestyle and beauty and fun stuff. So I left and I started my company, and here I am 5 years later.
That's awesome. And those boxes behind you are one of your clients, I take it.
So yeah, I'm really, really pissed about this. So there's this one skincare brand, I will not mention them, but I asked for samples to give to reporters and they sent 15 boxes. And they've taken over my living room, and to send them back would be about $1,000. So now I have Christmas gifts for everybody. Anybody I see gets a big bag. Send me your addresses. You all get lots of cool stuff.
I'm coming
awesome.
over.
I'm in.
I can't get rid of it fast enough. And it's like Nicole Miller, it's Tova, it's Javina, it's everything. So it's all yours.
We all have skin.
Yeah. So Jeremy, like the thing that we are most excited about that to talk about tonight that you have done is in our little world on Facebook and our publicist group, you have written the most clever, incisive, just dissecting what we do kind of posts. And it's brilliant and we love it.
Thank you.
I especially loved I think another publicist noticed this, that you use the word replete.
Yes.
Which is one of my absolute all-time favorite words.
Isn't it great? I love that word.
Such a good word. It's just so good on so many levels. But also the Zoom background. I mean, everything that you talked about, I just can't. I was laughing out loud, spitting out my coffee. So
part of it is I'm naturally sarcastic, and
we didn't notice that at all. That wasn't clear.
I've been on this horrible diet. And so I'm a bitch. And we'll see you next Tuesday. I have been so hungry and angry. So a lot of those lists are just me, like, just letting it out. But I try to do it with humor, and because I would say 90% of the people in our profession are really good. And so some of it is like wink, wink, nod, nod. We all know the bad ones. We all know the bad apples. And so this is kind of like me, like,
I think you're generous to them and hard on yourself, because I didn't get any, it didn't feel bilious. It didn't feel bitter.
Good.
It was really funny. I mean, you have a really sardonic wit, and you nailed it. It was hilarious. So kudos to you and thank you.
Seriously, I agree.
And I'm glad people actually, it resonates with people, because, we have a crazy profession, right? And I try to tell people what I do, and no one gets it. No one understands what I do. And, you have some people who just have no idea. And then the other people think it's just very glamorous. And we just go to parties and we're fabulous. And I'm like, you have no idea. So it's really nice to, like, get everything out of my head and to see people actually feel the same way I do.
I mean, I agree with every point, all
Thank
of your
you.
email and all of your posts. I mean, it's truths that are undeniable in our profession. And, we really and it makes sense to me that you were a writer. And same with Regina, like the two of you were writers makes a lot of sense to me, because
Completely.
we were talking before about, journalists or publicists that can't write,
Right.
we were talking about before.
Yeah.
And Tara, do you come across that a lot in other industries?
all the time. I'm blown away, especially just even the resumes. We're in the middle of interviewing right now to hire 2 positions, and we've started doing a writing test. We never in the entire time I've had the business did it. And I'm like, okay, now's the time, because even the attention to detail is mind blowing. I don't know how they don't see it. Especially, we got somebody did a writing test a while ago and they spelled Atlanta wrong, and we're in Atlanta and it was in the headline, and I was just like, oh wow, okay.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
wild.
I mean, it's amazing. Like, dear Tara Murphy, dear sir, give me job. Like I'm sure you get a lot of stuff like that.
Oh my gosh. Or where I see that they're sending emails to multiple PR people. And so it'll have 3 different names in it. It'll be addressed to me, but it'll have someone else's agency name in it.
Yep.
And it's fascinating. And it's really interesting too. During COVID, I started a call every Friday morning with a group of boutique PR owners here in the city. And we have done it every Friday since COVID started. And it was really kind of, hey, we're in this together. What are you dealing with? What are you dealing with? And now we're in the place where everybody's hiring. So this is the conversation on Fridays. And it's fascinating how everyone's experiencing it, and how quickly people are just like, okay, 5 minutes, the interview's 5 minutes and move on, because people are not invested in this work anymore.
Well, what I find really astonishing is the level, how do I put this delicately? The entitlement. Where I will talk to someone who's been working in publicity for a year, and they are going after a job that is just way out of their range. And I'll say, well, you probably need to pay your dues a little longer, or get some more experience under your belt. Are you sure you want to go for this job? It's a lot of responsibility, and it may be more than you can handle right now. And they say no. And I'm asking, I mean, they're offering $40,000 a year, and I think I'm worth 75. And I'll look at them and go, you've been out of school for a year and you've worked as an assistant. Like, don't you want to learn more? Don't you want to develop relationships and kind of sharpen your skills before you go for a job as a director somewhere? Like, it's insane. They think that they are entitled to the corner office and a 6-figure salary because they've been doing it for 2 years.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. Although, on the flip side of it, when I interviewed at Roadrunner Records back in 1997, and they said to me, so what's your experience? Can you get people in Rolling Stone? And I said, sure, I can get people in Rolling Stone. And I was a publicist at an indie label run out of someone's, living room before that. But I was like, oh yeah, I've done this, and I managed to kind of live up to it after a while, but I did blag a bit to get in.
Yeah, but
I think that's different than what Regina's saying, though.
Yeah.
Jamie, because I think it's, to do what we do, we had to have a set of balls, let's just say it, you had to get the door open. You had to just bullshit a little bit, because you wanted to show the fact that it's a sales job, we're lucky. I'm not diminishing it, but it is that job, where you're convincing people. So you have to have a little bit of moxie, let's just say.
Yeah.
But I think that's different than what Regina is saying. Entitlement of like, the expectation is that you're just going to accept that and go, oh, right. Oh, I forgot. It's time for you to have that job. Don't worry about it. That's a little different. And I just, I had the experience where I did a guest thing. A friend of mine was teaching at NYU in the music business program. So I went, she asked me to come in and talk about what I do. And I was amazed, because I put my business cards on the table, and I started by saying, I'm putting these cards out here, and I'm hoping I'm going to watch and see which one of you, if any, come up and take this card and engage me in conversation. I know it can be scary. You're in college, but I'm offering that to you. Come up to me at the end. One person came up to me, and that was Victoire, who I wound up giving an internship to at the agency I was working at, hired her, promoted her to be a publicist, and she's now doing her own thing with indie bands, like really like starter bands, and she's kick-ass. And it's like, here's this NYU education, right?
And
All
Johnny
I'm
says
thinking
she
as a
says
parent
hi.
is like, right, here's two professionals in the room that are telling you, I'm offering, you a door to walk through whatever it's worth to you. And one person took advantage of that.
No,
75 grand a year to go to NYU,
Yeah.
Well, the bane of
the
my
opposite also.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say the bane of my existence is, we all work with different firms, and we're doing a joint announcement, or whatever. I get these millennials who love minutia, and they love their Google Docs trackers and their Excel sheets, and they want everything color coded, and literally it's like this huge thing, and it's like name, email, date of birth, conversation, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm not spending my time doing that. Would you rather me pitching and, I don't know, getting you press, or do you want me to sit all day on a Google Doc? And a lot of young people think that's PR. They think updating the tracker is PR, and I'm like, no, that's administration. Sorry, I can't handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
And the most important thing I learned last year was how to undo track changes. Like how to get that out of the document. It really is.
The worst.
And then I had people that worked for me at one point that they thought their open rate of emails was doing PR well.
Oh my gosh, I just had that same conversation with someone who said, well, I pitched it, and I said, well, who did you call? Let's understand like where, what messages, who did you connect with? And they were like, no, I sent it out through MailChimp. And I was like, oh, wow, that's distribution. That's not pitching.
That's not pitching.
So we have some comments from the chat. Boulder Buzz was saying, oh, publicists who can't write. I've run into that. Also, publicists who don't understand a good hook or no sense about how to pitch a story. Getting the hook is really important, but it's also really hard.
Well, you know what it is I feel an advantage because I started as a newspaper reporter.
Yeah.
So I've been on the other end. And so when I write for the reporter, and I know exactly what they want to read. I know what the headline is. I know how they're going to talk to their editor. So I feel like those are muscles that I developed early in my years and have really helped me. Yeah. And that person is absolutely right. As publicists, we might be promoting something, but we got to figure out, how does this story help them? Like, what is, their job is not to promote our clients. Their job is to give something valuable to the readers.
Right.
So how do we pitch it to them that has a news hook, that is interesting, that is going to entertain an audience instead of just promoting our clients?
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to see it from the other side, because, a lot of people will say, like a lot of younger publicists say, will you cover my client? No. Read what the person does. Know how they like to write. Know what their favorite angles are. And then say, can you do XYZ on my client? And then it's a yes or no question, and then you'll get your answer.
Or even read the publication that the person writes for.
Right. Yeah.
That's required, 101, PR 101, right? Read the goddamn thing. It's like, I don't care about the sexy title. So it's Rolling Stone. There's a million people at Rolling Stone, and not everybody's interested in the same kind of music.
It is true.
Or stories or hooks or whatever. You're not going to go to Britney Spanos with the same thing you're going to Corey Grote with.
Right.
You're just not. And if you don't know the differences, then that's where you've got a lot to learn still.
And also we're pitching writers.
Exactly.
And so if we don't write well, they're the first people who are going to know it. Right.
Yeah.
So it's incumbent on us to, I don't know, we all know, we're all good writers here because we can spot the bad writers. But, this is the most judgmental audience you could be pitching. And if it's not well written, if it's not quick, if it's not concise, if it doesn't help them, they're just going to delete it, or they're just going to be like, no. And, that doesn't help us.
Yeah.
I think the problem also is that we here came from a generation where the phone was the tool, right? I mean,
Yep.
a press kit was something you built and put the folder in.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Oh, I remember stuffing those.
and the
Oh my
product and
God.
the album and the
Yeah.
tchotchke and all the
Pictures
things, and then you
and
mailed it. But before I even mailed it, you called the person to get to know them and figure
Right.
out who they were. And I encourage the person who works with me, Jamie, Johnny, to pick up the phone. I'm like,
Yep.
did you call the person?
Oh, no.
You know,
They
and
think
who
that's
knows?
email.
I mean,
They think
he's-
that's email.
sure.
Oh no, I call him. No, you emailed him. It's not the
Right.
same
Oh, I
thing.
talked to him. You mean you
And
talked to him
you-
on the phone? No, we texted. No.
Not the same
Not
thing.
the same.
You
Well,
don't wanna
but
talk
you
to
know,
them.
I will say you found somebody rare, rare
Oh,
young
I did.
person who
I did.
does things like that.
He's a rock
And
star.
it's funny. Boulder Buzz was saying the NYU story is so true. I've seen it in university publishing programs. Students who don't come up to engage speakers, those few who do, really stand out. Totally. And then Brian Reisman, hi Brian,
Brian.
Brian.
says, oh wait, not many publicists use the phone anymore. It's still effective. A new trend, sending several emails about the same thing, but not engaging that much. His Oh, okay. And then Raquel Bruno says her favorite publicists are the ones who understand the show or platform they're working with and find the angle and are solution based. The toughest ones we're dealing with are the publicists that are hired to be know people, mostly on the celeb side. And it's true. Like, I would love to be a no person. I think that would be wonderful. I would
No,
love
you
that job.
wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't. It's
You
hell.
know what?
It's horrible.
When I went to Polygram, Dennis Fine, rest his soul, one of the
Oh.
greatest humans and one of the greatest publicists from whom I learned so much, asked me if I wanted to work with him in a junior capacity on U2 Zeropa.
Oh my
And I
God.
said no, even though it was an incredible opportunity, precisely because I didn't want to be that no person, because I knew that 99% of that job was going to be people calling and asking if they could talk to U2, and I was going to have to say no.
Mhm.
And he handed me a list and said, okay, so who of these artists do you want to work? And I picked all the baby bands,
Right.
because that to me was the challenge, and that's what was exciting. Now, I think one of the greatest challenges we all face these days is also a challenge that the writers and editors face, which is with the shift to publications primarily going online, there is a requirement that writers and editors, that stories get X number of clicks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they no longer have the ability to put a superstar on the cover of their magazine that has a circulation of 1 million or 2 million or whatever it is, and then in the pages of that magazine, use Beyonce to get those newsstand copies, flip in 2 or 3 emerging artists who people don't know about yet. There's no longer that sense of discovery or their ability to champion something. I remember back in the day, there were people at MTV or VH1 or a TV booker or a journalist who would say to us, I want to help break this artist because I believe in this artist. I think this artist is amazing, and we're going to help you to break them. Now, granted, it's not their job to promote our client, but turning their readers on to someone that they think is amazing has got to be as thrilling for them as it is for us to land that booking. I remember when Ryan Shiraki was the booker at Saturday Night Live, and he called me and said, I have a
I
Christmas
loved him
present
so
for
much.
you."
I love that
It was
person.
amazing, but he called me, and I was working with a completely unknown British band at the time. And he called me and said, I have a Christmas present for you. I'm putting Portishead on Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
And he was so invested because he loved
He really
them.
was.
He thought they were doing something really revolutionary and really brilliant. And I was completely stunned because, you pitched everybody to SNL, but how many times did someone actually bite?
He was so good like that, though. I mean, he
Oh, he
did
was
that with us
incredible.
with Ben Folds 5,
Right. So you had those people, but they no longer have that kind of latitude to
No.
book something just because it's good, or to write about something just because it's good. I can't tell you how many friends have left major market newspapers because they said, I can no longer write about great music. I have to, and not to suggest that successful artists aren't great, but how many times can you write about this or that wildly successful pop act? And again, not to take anything away from them.
Nope.
But they just, I can think of one journalist who was let go from one of the biggest newspapers in America because his stories weren't getting clicks, because he was writing about great underground artists and heritage artists, and those stories weren't getting the clicks.
I have a great story in that one. I have this violinist. He's like 33. He's gorgeous. He's so talented. And I had been pitching him to Vanity Fair. And finally, they're like, okay, we're going to do it. And this is before Condé Nast kind of just went in and just cut everybody. But it was, you could read the tea leaves. It was going to happen. So anyways, they do this big photo shoot. I go there and there's 8 racks of clothes. There's 8 stylists. There's catering. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to end well. So anyways, they shot it. And 6 months later, it still hadn't run. And in between, Graydon Carter left, and they had all these things, and everybody who had commissioned the story was fired. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't know how it happened, but it literally got in the last issue that Graydon had touched, and it got in. But
thank God.
Oh my God, you're absolutely right though. Those people who like you can go to and I mean a violinist in Vanity Fair, those people don't exist anymore. It's all about clickbait. It's all about Kardashian
I think they exist, but they're blocked from doing what they want to do. I mean, like in chat here, Brian Reisman and Ken Scrudato are talking about it. And I remember
great people
Raquel,
who will take chances on new artists,
Yeah, and they can't do it as much as they'd like anymore, like Brian is saying. And I love Ken's take on influencers. Exactly. I want a free hotel suite because I have 1,500 Instagram followers. That would work really well for me. I have a bunch of Instagram followers. I would like that. But and then Raquel, when she was at MTV Radio, they would book all of my artists. I mean, I would be there constantly when MTV News was really doing music news, yeah, and the stuff Brian loves is harder to get exposure for. Yes, I know, because you're so goth, Brian.
Well, I'm really fascinated to ask the ladies on this panel, like, what do you think? What can move the needle these days? Like, is there one journalist who can break something and get it into the water supply, or are those days over?
Tara, what about you? What do you think of that?
Well, it's interesting. I was sitting here thinking about this is back in the day, we were doing PR for Sugarland. We did PR for Jennifer Nettles with Soul Miner's Daughter before she turned into Sugarland. And we had her or Sugarland to go to Nashville, and we ended up getting a CMT online writer out. They did a story and that helped them get a record deal. And so I was thinking about like how, that could happen so easily back then, or you got a Billboard piece on an up and coming artist. We did Sean Mullins and helped him get signed back then. Now it's so different. And in my world, I'm doing less artists, but when we do need to pitch artists, there aren't as many journalists that will cover them. So it's limited. And I'm thinking about, events and stories that we do, or, the click experience. We have a site here that's now around the country called What Now Atlanta. They're in LA, they're in a couple of other markets, and it's really more real estate, restaurant. And I went to them and I said, hey, listen, we have a hotel client and I think this would be a great story. And he's like, you're promoting your client. I was like, but here's the angle. We came up with a better story. And he was like, all right, let's test the waters. It was the highest clicked article for a week and a half for them. And I think, it's not necessarily one journalist, but I think it's about knowing who they are, having the relationship. Like all of this ties together to me. I think people like that didn't come up to you at school to talk to you, they're afraid of making relationships. And it's the relationships, the trust, and then getting it to that next level. And, you know, we've been in the market here in Atlanta for 25 years, and I can call people very easily and be like, hey, I need help. And that has turned into, you know, big stories for us. We just launched this past week the Friends Experience this network. We're launching it here in Atlanta. We just announced it. And I called the TV reporter at the AJC. Well, actually, I texted him and I was like, are you still covering TV? He's like, yep. And he had a story up in 20 minutes. And my team, though, couldn't do that. They didn't have the relationship, and that sparked multiple pieces. So going back to your question, it's like, you know, I guess it's who you know, but also, you know, going to the right person for it to spark and kind of, you know, turn into something bigger. So that
my whole thing is that we're also dealing with the other side of it, which are managers and clients that are like, oh, we want, you know, the following 5 things, right? And we want a tiny desk NPR. We want, you know, Rolling Stone, which I still don't understand, but okay. And, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then my whole thing is I find myself talking to managers more about the strategy of this new world that we live in, right? That it used to be this certain way that things were done in the before times, before the internet, right? There was like, Mary Campbell at Associated Press, rest in peace. You know, there were people that you would go to that actually did what you said, move the needle, right? So if you could get that piece, then it would be like, oh shit, you know, maybe I'll give a listen to this record now because of this person writing about this thing. And I guess it does happen a little bit like that, but it's more that clients aren't understanding the way it goes. And that is my dog, by the way.
Yes, that's a very cute noise.
He's very cute. But I think it's also a lot of managing of expectations where, you have to explain that, okay, this isn't, this site doesn't have this amount of things, but basically this writer is an expert and you need this person so that we can pull the quote and go to the next thing and pick up the phone. And I find myself doing a lot of that educating these days to especially younger managers. For some reason, older managers that were in the before times kind of get the new way more than the younger managers, in my experience. And I love them all. I just think that it's a lot of managing expectations and also doing what's realistic for the actual artist that you're working with, I mean, as Jamie knows, we worked BTS in 2017 and nobody even knew what K-pop was in the United States. I was literally on the phone going, okay, here's what this is. I didn't know what it was either. Look at these numbers. It really wasn't about the music at that moment. It was really more about, I could feel a tsunami coming. I knew what was going to happen. I felt it. Because those kinds of numbers don't lie. And I remember saying to Rolling Stone, I said this to Corey, I was like, I don't care if you don't like this music. That's not what this phone call is about. This phone call is about, look at the numbers, and you want clickbait, put them in 10 bands to watch. I promise you, you are the fucking Rolling Stone site at that point was so hard to navigate. It was a shitty site. And I said, it's gonna go down. I'm telling you, put it in.
Yeah.
And he actually listened. He went and looked at the number and he couldn't deny it. It was undeniable. So in that case, it wasn't about the music at all. My whole thing to them was, out of all the K-pop, this is kind of dark. They're talking about things. These kids are speaking in Korean. They're going to phonetic videos and learning the words. And that kind of feeling I hadn't had since the burgeoning of alternative music that we just talked about, right? Of this like growing thing, that it was like a cultural thing that was going to happen,
Well, this is what's so smart about what you did. You're pitching a reporter, you're pitching them a great story. And it's not just about the music. You're telling them this, what you said, a tsunami.
Right.
Like you literally gave the reporter a story on a plate.
Right. Well, that's how I thought of it. But I think in that case, that was the easy part of the job. The hard part is really working artists that don't have that, right? And finding the story and then managing the manager who thinks it's like the next second coming of white bread or whatever. And then the reporter's going, dude, there's no numbers here. I love it, but I can't write about it right now. And I have to accept all things. That's the position that we're all in right now.
Yeah, Karen Bliss is saying her phone never rings, just her mom and duct cleaners. So yeah, I mean,
We'll call her tomorrow.
yeah, Karen, your phone's gonna start ringing. But yeah, no, it's great, and so many really talented people that we deal with quite a bit are in the chat, and I appreciate that because and Ken is saying the problem is that young people are more devoted to apps than they are to artists, which is like ordering good food and eating the plate instead.
There's something that Tara said that I want to go back to because I think that we still have the relationships with the music journalists, but given what we talked about with them having to get the clicks, I don't think we can do that anymore as effectively as you are still able to do that in Atlanta. The stuff you were talking about being able to get someone on the phone. Let's take someone like Bob Boylan. Back when I was at Verve in 2001, 2002, I was literally one of the only music publicists regularly pitching NPR. I had to convince Diana Krall's managers to do a concert for All Things Considered. They wanted to do a special concert, and her managers did not see any value in doing something for NPR. Now, this was before the creation of NPR Music. I used to have no trouble at all getting people from NPR on the phone, having long conversations with them. The relationships were there, but now someone like Bob gets upwards of 800 emails a day.
It's horrible.
And I cannot get him on the phone. He told me if I ever need to reach him in a hurry, here's his cell phone number. But obviously, I'm not going to pitch him that way.
Yeah.
No.
There are so many journalists with whom I have a relationship that goes back to the mid 1980s, but either they're not in a position to do this anymore, nor can I get access to them, because even though we've been friends for 35 years, and when they, used to come in from LA or Chicago, they'd stay in my apartment. I can't get them. And it's not because I don't have the relationship with them. I also think that it's much harder these days, now that things have shifted to primarily online communication, to form those kinds of relationships. I think of certain journalists that I used to talk to once a week on the phone, and it progressed from, I've got this artist that you really need to hear, to, oh my God, you're having a baby, how exciting, to what are you watching? What movies have you seen? What are you reading? What do you love? And we formed those deep, deep friendships. These days, it's much, much harder when, again, your primary communication is an email, and they know that if they email us, we're going to respond right away and get them everything they need. But I could fire 20 emails, out into the universe in a day and just never hear back. And then, I'll see someone, I'm not going to name names, but I'll see someone who I've been trying to get for months, who I've known for 30 years. And she'll say, oh my God, I owe you like 200 phone calls.
Yeah.
And I mean, this happens. I run into these folks at Americana Fest or at South by Southwest, or, if I'm in LA for the Grammys, and I will run into these journalists or these editors, and they will literally say that to me, like, I have owed you so many phone calls back for months. It's not because I don't want to get back to you. It's just because I'm too slammed.
Yeah, I have a trick for that. And it's a little sneaky. You can't do it often. But sometimes if I really need to get journalists' attention, I put RE, as if we've already talked. Like, we've already, they've replied, I've replied, and I'll put like, hey, like it's a personal message. And then they'll be like, I always get a reply, and they're like, what is this about again?
Yeah.
What's interesting is I'll sometimes, I almost never use Twitter. I just kind of hate Twitter. But sometimes I'll tweet at someone in response to something that they've tweeted, not as a trick or a means to get them, but that will trigger something in them.
Yeah.
And
And
Karen
then
Bliss is
suddenly I
saying
get
that she gets pitched on Facebook and Instagram Messenger.
who said
uh,
that?
Karen Bliss from Billboard, and you know, and that happens too with Brian Reisman and like a lot of other people. And I don't know, I feel weird about that. I feel like that's intruding on their
Yeah,
personal
don't do that.
space.
I don't do that ever.
I mean,
Yeah.
the only time I ever reach out is in that way, not a full pitch ever, but if I feel like I have that next level relationship with the person,
Oh
then I
yeah.
will say, hey,
Yep,
I
yep,
don't want to, I'm not going to pitch you here, but can you
yep,
please just look at the email? It's like, that's all I'm asking,
exactly.
I have
But I
done
won't do that for people that I do not know. Like
Yeah, I agree.
if I don't have that, if it's, even if it's only been an email relationship where they actually did something for one of my clients, I still won't pitch them that way because I just think it is intrusive, like you said, Jamie.
Yeah, and I did something with Vice at one point. It was Sunderman who was there, or
Oh God.
yeah,
Bye-bye.
yeah, but I basically wrote, "You are giving me a complex" in the subject, and,
Love
and
it.
I
You should have
wrote,
sent a naked picture of somebody's breast, then maybe he
"Oh,
would have
geez."
written back
Well,
to
I
you.
didn't know that then.
Sorry, did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to. I'm
Ah.
sorry.
And I was like, "Listen, I said something like, 'Don't make me jump out the window. Answer my email.'" You know, like, and I would do stuff like that, and it was really funny because Kim Kelly sat next to him, and she would go, "Oh my God, you just made Eric laugh out loud," and I was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Okay, job done." You know, or at Jason Pettigrew, I would be the subject would be, "You don't love me anymore."
Well, and I think you're touching on something too, because a lot of it's just humor, and it's coming up with an offbeat quote or a joke, or just make someone laugh. Like sometimes I'll put something a little off color in emails, or like I'll try to think of a funny subject line
Yeah.
because I was a reporter, and I just remember like hundreds of emails in your box about promoting our new mop and then our rest, like, and literally it's hundreds of just press releases. And so I think, for me, what works is like just trying to like catch them off, something offbeat, get their attention, make them laugh. Like Jamie, what you were saying, that's exactly that works.
Yeah, I mean, I had to be jokingly suicidal for Eric Sunderman to get back to me, but he did do the story, so hey,
Right.
like
Yeah,
Never worked.
absolutely.
Amy, you asked us earlier who we think is doing exceptional work
yeah,
as journalists. And I want to say that I am absolutely blown away by two trade publications that I think are doing the most exciting and vital work they've done since I've been doing this.
Ooh,
The team at Variety,
Absolutely.
Shirley Halpern, Chris Willman, and Jem Oswald
Gem
are
is my
doing,
fave.
oh my God.
Absolutely incredible what Shirley has done with that magazine since she got there.
Yeah, 2017, they started the
Transformed,
music
yeah.
section. They're doing some of the most groundbreaking,
Yep.
incredible journalism, both news, breaking news stories, really in-depth journalism and in-depth criticism.
Oh God,
Is
yes.
just so missing in this day and age.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And also what Nekesa Moody is doing at the Hollywood Reporter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is fucking amazing. Those two, Nekesa at the Reporter and Shirley's team at Variety,
Couldn't agree more.
down the best in the business.
And then I'd like to point out that in both of those cases, Shirley is using writers that are actual journalists with years of experience. She is hiring and working with younger journalists, but for the most part, the sort of editorial great journalism that we're seeing is Chris Willman, Jem, people, Roy Trakin got to, I loved seeing their bylines because, a lot of times it's become an ageist situation as well, and I think Chris is right on the tip of new music, as is Jem. I mean, they're not,
And I
and even
love-
the label stuff they're doing, like we're working on something right now with her, and it's, they really get what the business is right now, and they know what they're great journalists. You know, there's
Yeah,
just, I couldn't agree more with you, Regina.
And
and
the
in
other
doing
person that
this
I want
show,
to
oh,
shout out to, I'm so sorry,
go ahead.
Jamie. I was just going to say the work that Marissa Moss is doing is phenomenal. She is using, I mean, she's a brilliant, brilliant critic, and she's doing a lot of really great music criticism, but she's also using her platform to change things. You know, her story in Politico a few years ago, after the big Las Vegas, that mass shooting at the concert,
Mhm.
and she took on the subject of country music's relationship with guns and gun culture.
I
And
love that story.
how this was
Yeah.
such a galvanizing moment. She did a huge piece for Rolling Stone about country radio, exposing the sexual harassment
Oh,
in country radio and the sexism. And she's completely fearless, but she is a brilliant reporter and a great critic. And I just think that the work she's doing is incredible. So
yeah. Well, I've got to say I really agree. Like with all your recommendations, and I love I love doing this show that I'm doing on Wednesday nights where I get to talk to these people a lot. You know, it's great. Like I had Karen on, I had Brian on, I had, Raquel on, and I get to talk to people to see their perspective and their point of view on what's going on with publicists. And it's so enlightening and so great. And yeah, so we do that on Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. And Tara, in your business, whose work are you admiring lately?
Because one of the questions you had was about bloggers and journalists, and obviously that whole space with influencers is very interesting these days. But there are a number of people here in Atlanta who, I mean, and we do stuff all over the country, but there are a lot of journalists here in Atlanta that are now, stringers or doing national work. And we've got one, well, a couple actually, a woman named Leah Picard, who was a blogger here, and we became friendly. And over the years, she's really turned into an incredible writer. But she also now is writing nationally. She just had a piece in the Washington Post. She had Food and Wine, Tropical Leisure, Real Simple. Like, she's doing stuff all over the place. Today, she posted about Southern living. And it's just great to see somebody like that who started really as a blogger turn into, somebody that's making a name for themselves nationally. There's another girl, Nikisia, Nikisia Pinnell, and she writes for delish.com and a number of other, larger publications here. And she was a blogger, and she also has a food product that she's pushing. And so she's done incredible work. So there are people like that I think are really making a name.
That's
A guy
great.
named Mike Jordan, a gentleman named Mike Jordan here, who's writing he was the Thrillist editor for a while, and now he's, Playboy and Rolling Stone, and just a number. He's our Atlanta or Southeast Guardian from the UK. He covers stuff for the Guardian. So
Oh, wow.
it's been really great to see people like that, get on the national scene. But we were talking earlier too about, connecting via social media to journalists. And I don't know if you guys are experiencing this. A lot of people that I'm friendly with are posting on social media saying, I'm looking to speak to someone about, or I'm covering this. And we're getting a lot of success pitching that way. There's a woman that used to be here in Atlanta, is in LA, and writes for dirt.com about real estate. And she's like, I'm looking for listings, and I said, all over? She's like, yep, I'll write about it anywhere. So, we're sending her things. So I don't know if you're seeing that in the music space, but I'm definitely seeing it in arts and culture and real estate.
In
especially on-
lifestyle a bit.
complaining about us, about the pitches that they get.
Say that one more time.
We're seeing writers complaining about us on Twitter.
Yeah.
Of us
That's
endlessly.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to, when we were first starting in music PR, there was this weird hierarchy where, depending on your title, you weren't really allowed to pitch the following people, right? There was like, when you started, I was a tour publicist, so I did all local regional stuff, and I wasn't allowed to pitch Spin or Rolling Stone or anything like that. And then television was its own sort of universe that you had to kind of work up to. And, when you're in it, it's kind of like annoying because you know what you're capable of and you want to build these relationships. But the other side of it is that now it's a free-for-all out there. So you have that person that has that year experience pitching, Saturday Night Live or going over to Juliet Fallon, and they don't know her from fucking, excuse my language, a hole in the wall.
Right.
So it's become, I think, that much harder for journalists and producers to know who's who and what's what. They used to be able to kind of discern, oh, okay, that's Vivian from Epic. She does television. Yeah, I need to open that, and I'm referencing Vivian Piazza, who was a retired publicist that we all know. But I mean, I think, she was my boss and I understood it. I was doing one thing over here that nobody else was doing. It's like, you had to kind of do that little bit of a niche because that's how you built the relationships. And that's how you didn't piss everybody off that you were calling and reaching out to, and there are no rules. It's a boundaryless, free for all.
But that was tricky because when Ellen and I were at Atlantic, the country was divided down the middle, and there was West Coast-based team, Shelley and Kathy Aquaviva.
Yeah, Kathy Aquaviva.
Oh, I remember Kathy.
And Kathy and Shelley talked to West Coast people, so we were not allowed to reach out to the LA Times.
Nope.
And Tony Mandich was the TV publicist, vice president.
Yes, he was.
Publicity. All he did was talk to TV bookers.
I never encountered that. I guess I wasn't at a major label till 2001. So I guess where I was at smaller labels, I had to do everything. And that, that was good for me. I mean, shit, when I was at Roadrunner, Barbara Libus was like so good to me. I can't even tell you. Like Tonight Show. Oh my God.
But that's what kind of made me put my foot in my mouth a few times because I came from Roadrunner and Frontier. And then I was at Atlantic, and these folks that I had been talking to were reaching out to me, and I was taking the call and going,
I have such vivid memories of that, Regina. You have no idea. Totally vivid memories of that.
There were a lot more rules. When I went to Universal, I used to get in trouble all the time because I used to do stuff that was out of my domain. Like I sent a photographer on the road with Three Doors Down, and they were like, you shouldn't have done that. I was like, I do it first and ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission because you're never going to get it. And we're well over an hour. Jeremy, I want to hear from you who you're reading lately. What are you interested in these days?
I deal with lifestyle, and I have found some really, really great resources. So I had one producer call me from Scripps Broadcasting, and they wanted to do a piece on one of my clients, and I was like, oh, great. Did it. It aired on 35 local TV stations.
Wow.
Scripps owns huge stations all around the country. Detroit, Tampa, literally, I was getting alerts. And so now she's my go-to person. Nice. And then the other thing, a lot of people don't know this, but WWD, trade magazine for fashion and beauty, that goes around the world. And they have great cultural coverage. They have great hospitality. They do restaurants, bars, hotels, obviously fashion, beauty. Anytime I get someone in there, it first of all, it gets on all the search engines. So now it's in Paris, and it's fantastic. And they're so great to pitch. They love a well-written pitch. So those are my go-tos.
That's awesome. And so I want to thank you guys. I mean, we could be on here for 3 hours
exactly.
with all we have to talk about. And I appreciate your time and your wisdom so much. And Karen Bliss was saying, if you have any charity/cause stories, get in touch with her because she runs Samaritan Mag. And that it's about good works and it's wonderful. I'm a big fan of